It is no wonder why Stellar Blade is one of the most anticipated games of the year. Its gorgeous aesthetic, its intense combat, its beautiful music, and intriguing character design has everyone enamored with the game. And today we have a ton of brand new gameplay and story details. So if you're excited for Stellar Blade, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because this channel brings you all Stellar Blade news all the time. And today we got a brand new interview from German publication Play 3, detailing a ton of information about the game, including its graphics and performance mode options. The first thing of interest here is the game's combat, with them saying of course that the game is not just about randomly and mindlessly pressing buttons to bombard enemies, and how you'll have to take advantage of your opponent's patterns, see how they move and attack, and respond accordingly. The team was then asked, quote, "Speaking of combat, many players online often compare the action and feel of Stellar Blade to Nier Automata from Platinum Games. Was this game perhaps a source of inspiration for you when developing Eve's adventure?" Kim: "Yes, Nier Automata was a very important game that inspired the development of Stellar Blade for our developers who worked on the game, and it was a big help. But if you compare the combat to games other than Nier, it might be somewhere between Bayonetta, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, or Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. That might make it more understandable when you think about the fight." So it's really interesting to hear him say this, primarily because I've been wondering where the difficulty on this game is going to be placed. I didn't really expect this to be a Soulsborne game, but I was hoping for something a little bit less on the stylish side, like a Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, and a little bit closer but not all the way toward being a Soulsborne game. This game describes itself as being somewhere in between, which is exactly where I wanted it to be. So for me, this is really great news. Of course, if you truly crave the most punishing experience, you can bump that difficulty all the way up to the max. Perhaps like in Sekiro and Jedi Fallen Order, will there be some kind of stance meter that needs to be broken during fights? Kim: "Yes, you can defeat bosses by using skills very well and protecting yourself from the enemies, but then you also have the chance to maybe upset the opponent's balance, and then that leads to the Link ability, which allows you to defeat an enemy in one fell swoop. So the combat is more combo oriented in the beginning, but as you progress through the game, you learn to parry and dodge, and then you learn different types of skills depending on how you need them. This makes the fight more like quick and varied melee, and then maybe you get to the middle part of the game, you can also experience a ranged attack mode so that users can experience different fighting styles." Next we have the world of Stellar Blade, and their approach to the world design. This is going to be a hybrid game that is semi-open world, with thorough linear sections. This is something that we discussed in the last video. However, I think this style of world design is pretty much optimal. It allows you to be story focused whenever the game needs to be. However, there are plenty of opportunities for the player to have freedom and explore. This is a delicate balance, and not every developer is able to get it right, with many open world games having little to no story, and many linear games having absolutely no exploration. Stellar Blade is going to be trying to get the balance right. The interviewer asking, quote, "In Stellar Blade, we explore a semi-open world with Eve. Why did you choose this option, and what arguments ultimately spoke against a linear or a completely open game world?" At the beginning, the game goes into a linear mode in a straightaway, but once you get to a city called Zion, you experience a part of the semi-open world, and then you can go back to the more linear forms of the game, but you experience different variants of this. But when it comes to narrative games, a completely open world might be difficult, because for the narrative to be the focus, you need some linear elements in it. We didn't want to limit it to a specific genre, but rather combine everything in a balanced ratio and show it all. And all of this was possible thanks to PlayStation's seriously fast loading capabilities, so you can experience everything seamlessly in the game. In addition, when the game is too linear, you sometimes focus too much on the coordination of a single element. That's why we included the City of Zion. Then you could take a break to control the player's attention, and then you can move on to other parts of the game from there. This is something that I completely agree with. I think that open world is not really that great for telling a story usually. However, the way that you can make that work is to have linear sections throughout that open world that do restrict some player freedom temporarily and focus on delivering the next big story moment. Then you can return the player back to the open world. I think this balance also prevents the player from being fatigued. You don't really get open world fatigue because there there are these linear sections, and in a similar fashion, you don't feel locked into only doing one thing like you do sometimes in linear games. Then we have the biggest draw to Stellar Blade, of course, Eve's character. She is currently shrouded in mystery. These are the first few details that we have on her character. The interviewer asking, quote, "So far we know very little about our protagonist Eve. What do you think makes her an interesting character that players can root for and empathize with?" Eve, just like the player who plays the game at the beginning, starts with limited information in a situation where she needs help but has no information. This is how it all begins. In the beginning, she doesn't show that much emotion because she's a soldier. She doesn't show that much of her feelings. Over time, she interacts with her comrades and other survivors, and they form this solidarity. And as she gradually shows more and more emotions, she also has to choose between certain decisions. That's cool. It actually sounds like she's a Final Fantasy protagonist. She would fit in quite well with Cloud, Squall, and Lightning. But here's where things get interesting. They were asked, are there perhaps moments in the game in which players can influence the further course of a quest with their decisions? They responded, this may contain some spoilers, so we can't give too much away, but by interacting with the citizens of Zion while going on quests, you can unlock certain systems and information. When you actively play, you can experience an expanded worldview, so depending on a user's choices, you can see more of this world during the game. That is really cryptic and really fascinating, because I did not think that this would be a type of game where your choices actually mattered in any sense. And by that, I mean, I didn't think that there would actually be any choices to make in this game. I thought it'd be a fairly straightforward game, but according to this, depending on certain choices, you will actually get to see more of the world. Clearly, they don't want to spoil anything here, as this must be linked to some type of big surprise. However, this is incredibly curious. I really want to know what they mean by this. Next, they talk about their support from PlayStation, including the game's performance overall. They've said that their partnership with Sony has been truly incredible, and that they've helped a ton throughout development. This is Shift Up's first console game. They're mostly known for their mobile games before this, and they were very thankful to Shuhei Yoshida of Sony for his technical support. Now, of course, everyone who's developing a PlayStation 5 exclusive will say something similar. It's all thanks to the power of the PS5. However, what is the power of the PS5 actually doing for the performance of the game? And this question we finally have an answer to. Quote, "You also mentioned that you were able to make Stellar Blade thanks to the PlayStation 5. How do you plan to use the console's features in the game? Will there perhaps even be a performance and quality mode?" Kim, "The game was created in 60 frames per second, so the performance mode allows you to experience very smooth action, even in 4K. We also definitely use the features of the DualSense, feedback and vibrations, as well as the adaptive triggers that can be used in third-person mode. The game's touchpad is also used. To go into a little more detail about the graphics modes the game will utilize, there are 3 in total. A performance mode that we have already mentioned that offers 60 frames per second, so you can experience very pleasant gameplay. There's also a resolution mode where you can enjoy the game in 4K. And there is a balance mode in which we try to find a balance between the 2 previous modes. This balance mode has me incredibly interested. Only a couple of games I think actually offer a balance mode. Most games are just performance or graphics, so I'm incredibly interested to see what their balanced mode actually is going to offer and what it's actually going to perform like. April 26th is not that much further away, and between playing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Dragon's Dogma 2, the time will just fly by. But let me know in the comments what excites you the most about Stellar Blade. Shout out to Squall UA and the rest of the Ultima community.